Hey, thanks for joining us on this episode. My name is Eric Marquez. I'm your host, and I'm here again with Pastor Wes Kennedy,
All
good
right.
friend, pastor at New Life Community Church in Montgomery.
That's right. Hey,
And we have a special guest today, too. We have Tanisha Horn. I know your husband more than I know you. You're
Yes.
pastor of New Life Hammond, right?
Yes.
And a mother of 6 and a marriage therapist, right? Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that.
Yes. So for the last 8 years, the Lord has blessed me to be able to help marriages stay together. I really have a heart to see marriages flourish and for families to stay together. And so, yeah, so that's my passion. And I love helping people work through issues to make sure they stay on solid footing.
Yeah, that's great. And, part of the reason we're in this podcast right now. And so I just want to dive right into it. I want to
Yeah.
honor your time. I want to honor your guys' time. We have some great content in this series. We're trying to bridge the gap between emotional health and spiritual maturity, right?
Okay.
And learning more about the Bible, right? You can learn a lot about the Bible and growing in discernment, but that doesn't mean that you instinctively know how to be emotionally healthy, right? Those two are not one and the same. In fact, I would say, how much of the Bible do we actually know, but struggle to consistently do,
yeah.
right?
Amen.
That's the struggle of our life. That's the
Yes.
story of my life, really, right? So we've been unearthing or unpacking one at a time these emotions that we all deal with. But maybe we don't deal with them in a healthy way, or maybe we're unaware that we are really in the thick of it. So we're opening them up in discussion to really help the listener and all of us to take that next step,
Okay.
right? So today we're talking about anxiety.
All right.
Anxiety.
Yeah.
I feel anxiety every single time I watch the Chicago White Sox lately, especially when they take out a pitcher who's doing well and then they put in someone from the bullpen, and I'm just like, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And then they give up runs, and yeah, it's a lot of anxiety.
You give a lot of power to the White Sox.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Or their
You know.
management.
Yeah.
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 Well, that's a whole nother podcast and a whole nother discussion.
Mm-hmm.
But anxiety, man, that's a big deal. That's not a small thing. Especially, I think, at the time of this podcast is recording, we're on the backside of the curve from this global pandemic that's been happening for the last couple of years.
Yes.
COVID and people being locked in, and that has really escalated, I would say, anxiety for sure, right?
Yes.
And we're going to get into some other emotions in different episodes, but for this one, anxiety. And so let's talk about that. I want to talk about first, Tanisha, if maybe you can just unpack this for us. What is anxiety?
Yeah. I think a simple way to look at it is excessive worry. And I like how Wes said you gave the White Sox a lot of control, right? And so you thinking about that, like, do you give anger a lot of control, irritability, this ideal of like maybe too much worry about particular things where because I think you say anxiety, you could get confused, but it's like it's too much power. Like it's too much power for a particular thing, though. So it could be your marriage, it could be a person, it could be the environment, it could be money. There could be a few different things that you focus on, but it has too much power, and it leads to you feeling restless, irritable, angry. It can even lead to the point where you feel depressed and sad, which I know we'll get into in the next podcast. But if you keep peeling that onion back, it's the fear that's there, and so this fear, and it can come. I think a lot of times I see with clients, it's not able to rest, not able to have peace, constantly tense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Did you want to add to that, Wes?
Yeah. So on one hand, we all experience anxiety every day.
Yeah.
if we ever have a deadline or have to go to school or have to go to work or have
Yeah.
to get the kids ready, these are things that activate us, that honestly make our
Getting the
heart beat a
kids
little
ready,
bit faster.
for sure.
Yeah, especially the kids
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
They make our heart beat a little bit faster. They make us sometimes drive a little faster, right?
Mhm.
But there's a level of anxiety where it takes control of
Yes.
us, and
Yes.
that's where we really want to become aware of it.
So there
Yeah.
is a difference, right? We're talking about when we're trying to describe what anxiety is. Really, that word excessive is key,
Yeah.
or obsessive maybe too. Like I think there's a difference between general concern,
Yeah.
which is healthy.
Right.
It's okay to be generally concerned about your children,
Yes.
right? I talked about this on Mother's Day this year, and I read this article from, it was like a mommy blog, and she was walking through her entire life, walking with her kids, and it was under the banner of a mother never stops worrying,
Mm.
right? A mother never stops worrying, and she talks about when she's in the emergency room with her kid who got a cut on his forehead and he's got to get a couple stitches, and she's looking up at the doctor saying, when do you ever stop worrying? And the doctor's like, oh, just wait until they get out of the accident stage, and then, but it never stops, right? It never
Right.
stops, even to the point where the kids are adults, they have their own children, and you are still worrying about their successes or their failures or their disappointments, and they're on you. You end up worrying about the grandchildren, maybe even more than you worried about your children,
Yeah.
right? And so this is excessive worry, I think, is what we're trying to open a door to,
Right.
right? Which then kind of lends it, right? The question many times, I think the stigma is that if you're anxious about anything, you're sinning. That's a sin, right? And I wonder, what are your thoughts on that? Is all anxiety a sin? Is if a level of anxiety is general concern, which can lead us and motivate us,
Mhm.
is that sin? Or how do we tell the difference between those things?
Tell the difference between general concern and excessive.
Yeah.
I think like the examples we kind of threw around, like, okay, yes, a mom does worry, right? But then what does she do with that? Does she check her phone 10 times to make sure the child said they were where they said they were going to be? And it's like a third grader, not like a teenager, right? Like, is it in context? Like, are you calling your spouse every 5 minutes because you feel like he's cheating? Like, there has to be context. And I think if you are doing things that don't the proof is not there for you to have that context, so it's like, oh, you know what, I only go off 2 hours of sleep. Why? Oh, because I'm not able to sleep. Why not? Well, I have a lot of fear. About what? Well, I'm afraid that I'm not going to have my job. I'm afraid that my kids don't love me. And if we keep talking, it's like, it's not really the correct context. The lens in which you're looking through your life is really fear-based, I think would be a big sign for me that there's more anxiety there than maybe you've even realized. And sometimes you're just used to functioning in a way for a period of time that you may not see it that way. You may see it like, this is just the way I am. I'm a control freak. I have to make sure XYZ happens, to the point where you don't let anybody else help you. Right. And so there are more questions to be asked. Obviously, we're just talking in general terms here. And so we don't want people to self-diagnose and so this is why we're having the conversation. But I think if you were to really ask the Lord, like, is my heart based in fear? And yes, that could be sinful because we're supposed to trust in God, but I think as you journey with the Lord and he can show you in a very gentle way, like, okay, you're not trusting me, you trust in your job. You don't trust in me, you trust in that person. What else did you want?
That's well said. Yeah. Ultimately, it's the object of
Yeah.
what we're anxious or worried or preoccupied, which are all first cousins of fear, what we're fearful about. Because angels in scripture say, do not fear. They're not saying, don't be afraid. They're saying, don't be afraid of me. I'm not the object that should be the object of your fear. When God says to the Israelites, do not fear, he's saying, don't fear the enemies as you cross over into this land. It's ultimately about the object, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and right living and well-being.
Yeah.
So it's almost like trading out. Oftentimes we cheat ourselves because we trade out this this bigger and this better fear of the Lord, which mobilizes us for the best living and well-being, for all these cheaper, lesser fears that end up controlling us.
Yeah. And that's hard, right? Because we're talking about trusting or fearing God who you cannot see, versus the things that are playing out in your eyes, right, in your vision that you can see, right? And it's a easy to trade that. And we talked about this, that anxiety, if we were to reduce it down, right, at the base of it's this fear, but it's a misplaced fear.
Yeah. To make it a little bit more operative for people, you can think about if you knew that your life was going to end in 6 months, and you knew that you had 6 months to live, all of a sudden the things that you prioritize, the things that you're mobilized to do, would begin to shift, probably for most of us, because there's this bigger and this better fear of being separated from certain people that we love, or not having certain influence over relationships, a company, a ministry, whatever it is. And so all of a sudden, sort of our what seems big to us now, thinking we got years and years, will be reprioritized because there's this bigger, better fear. So if we can do that thought experiment and get there and realize, oh yeah, that would totally change the way I live. Well, even more so with a bigger and better fear, which is fear of the Lord, which isn't cowering in a corner, but recognizing in awe that, wow, like God is dangerous for sinners, but everything that he could do to me, he's already done to Jesus. That leads us to jaw-dropping awe and complete worship. It mobilizes us for a different kind of living. The other side of that fear is like, if I love somebody, I'm afraid of hurting them, not fearing like what they're going to do to me. Again, God's already done what he could do to us, to Jesus, but I live differently because I love that person. So the fear of the Lord is very much awe and love, and that's a much even bigger and better fear than the fear of dying in 6 months. But that helps us at least make it operative. And how would this looks in life?
Yeah. I was thinking the other day, how would my perspective shift if I just really believed everything was going to be okay? Like if I really believed, you know what, everything's fine. Like, how would that change your course when you like, you know what, this is good. Everything is going to be fine. Like the next year is going to be great. The next 2 years, wow, I'm excited about it. Like just the shift in your perspective of even having like the faith to say, wow, things are going to be good. You know, and not from a place of like, oh, I don't know if this is going to work out in 4 months. I'm not sure if I'm making the right choice here. Like, I think that's part of the anxiety where it's so much ambiguity, right? And you just live in that place of like, well, what if?
That's what we've been at though for the last 2 years, right?
True.
Everybody's like, I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
You know, what does vision for my company or organization or for my family, even school, right? I mean, people missed out on graduations. They missed out on social things. My kids missed out on prom, you know, things like that. Like there was just nothing. And when all the things are taken away, you begin to stop thinking about, oh, it's going to be great. You're like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. Right.
True.
And that type of ambiguity, that type of vagueness, right, leaves you restless. It leaves you clarity.
Yeah.
I've heard it this way. Clarity reduces anxiety.
Right.
And sometimes people just need some structure in their lives to reduce their anxiety. I mean, to make this theological, God is a God of order and beauty. Not all structure. The Spirit moves like the wind and we can't know, where it's blowing. But God is very much a God of order and structure and beauty and patterns and design. And literally psychologically, we need certain, our levels of anxiety decrease when we have certain rhythms, let's call them, not monotonous routines,
yes,
or boring procedures, but rhythms in life. And honestly, for us, for some of our listeners, we just need a little bit more structure in our life, and we're going to see dramatic changes in our level of that excessive anxiety when we're running around saying, well, what? Yeah. Okay, well, let's make some things clear, as you said.
Yeah. Clarity reduces anxiety. I think it's so true. And I think that's why this is such an important topic to bring up, to talk about, for any listener, really, because we've seen the whole world kind of just in this, right? And then we saw expressions, let's talk about not just how the body manifests, like stress, to these things, but also how behavior has been changed or expressed, right? In the recent, in the last year or so. It can get volatile. It can get very destructive.
Yeah.
And so it's so important to talk about these things, to bring clarity to it, to name it, to put the fear back where it should be, and stop letting it rob us of a really us wellness, like wholeness, where we can think and be free in that way. I think to someone that's listening right now, thinking about, without self-diagnosing, right? We're not promoting that, but understanding what anxiety is. There are things that we can see, maybe like an indicator on your car dashboard, right? Or dash. When the check engine light comes on, it lets you know, oh, that's the problem. I need to look into that.
Yeah.
Right. And even though that light is blinking or on, I still don't know what the problem is.
Right.
I need to go somewhere like, an AutoZone or something like that. And they hook up the machine and they read your engine to tell you what's wrong with the engine, or potentially what you need to focus on. I think there's things, indicators or signs that maybe we can bring to light, to maybe help somebody be self-aware. Right. And so let's talk about that. Like, what would you say are like the warning signs for excessive worry?
Sure.
Right. And then what can we do about those things? What can we do?
Yeah, I think your example of like AutoZone kind of getting us to understand where you was coming from. One of the big things that I think people don't really understand is that therapists go to school. Like, we go to school for a while. And so just like AutoZone, mechanics know what they're doing. I wouldn't try to fix my own car. And so if you have a question, you can call a mental health professional, or you may know someone who is in the medical field also, who could sort of like, hey, you know what? Even your doctor, your pediatrician, or, like they ask questions about mental health all the time, so you can start with people who know what they're doing, who go to school, and just say, this is what I was thinking about. Is that normal? Is that okay? I'm feeling this way. Should I talk to someone? Like, just like you would if your car was breaking down, you would go to the person who specializes in that. So let me just give that disclaimer. And then also, you asked the question, what are the warning signs? I would say a big one is irritability, being very irritable. Your sleep is off, and anger. Those are the big ones, I would say. What was the second part of your question, Eric?
Yeah, like what can I do to this? So maybe some practical things. But I want to say this too. It's kind of like when what's the difference between a cold and the flu sometimes, and the symptoms? Runny nose is in both of them, right?
Yeah.
So just because you're irritable doesn't mean that you're stricken with anxiety.
Well, if you're irritable all the time.
Right, but it could mean, so it's like this warning sign. So for the person who's going to want to self-diagnose, because we just said this one label, like we don't want to push them in that direction, but we do want to say that if these things are
controlling you,
or in your life constantly, you need to open up the hood and look inside.
And I would just add racing thoughts. Inability to sleep, restlessness, inability to relax or slow down or unplug at times. Those are also typical indicators.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for someone, Wes, we were talking about someone maybe doing with panic attacks, or if you feel like things are on the rise, right? You're by yourself. What are some of the things that you can do to not let anxiety take control in that moment? I don't know if there's something practical, that it's not the quick fix or it's not going to solve everything, but it's helpful, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about where anxiety is not to the level where you need to go and seek professional help, but if you don't do something, you'll be there.
Well, and I would say this is actually part of the diagnostic process. It's like the difference between someone experiencing something hard and someone experiencing trauma is that the coping skills typical for that person are no longer dealing with it. And that's when it's traumatic and when you need the special work. Mm-hmm. So these things are part of the diagnostic process, what we're about to explain, in terms of if these work, great, fantastic. And if it's beyond these things, well, then that's just part of an indicator to maybe go talk to a professional. So
yeah,
I think I would say therapy is okay for everybody. Yeah. Like there's a spectrum of anxiety, and maybe you're at a 1 and you want to talk to someone. That's okay. If you're at a 10, like I think part of the debunking is saying therapy is okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. And even better if you can get one that's a Christian, I mean, just a plug. But if not, like it is okay. Yeah. Therapy is okay. And so I think your question was what again?
What can you do?
Like, what can you do? Things? I liked Wes's very first suggestion, structure. Like maybe you need a to-do list. Maybe you need to sit down and take 10 minutes in silence and say, this is where I want my energy to go.
Maybe you need a to-don't list.
Maybe you need a to-don't list. Maybe you need to say no, but just taking like 20 minutes and slowing down, putting your cell phone away. Yeah, I said it. Ooh, yeah. Put your cell phone away. It's like constant. We're all guilty of it, but you have to put it away. Like it shouldn't be on. I like how you're saying
that, and I have like my iPad and my phone on my lap.
Right, like put the devices away and be quiet. And one of the big things that I really tell people is get outside. God's creation speaks to us, and so looking at the sun, admiring him. They call it mindfulness. But taking the time to admire his beauty, looking at his stars and his sun and letting the wind blow on you, like those are all reminders of his love. And so getting outside, walking, and then making sure you're in that moment and basking in his beauty. Yeah. If you're out there with your family, you're in the moment. You're not texting. You're not like doing too many things at one time. That's anxiety provoking too, So taking some small steps like structure, getting outdoors, taking small walks, setting a bedtime. You cannot binge watch TV all the time or the news. Like you got to turn that stuff off and allow your mind to relax because it's too much. It's always this busy, constant. So if you turn those things off and you just bask in quiet, you would probably see a big difference. Yeah. And then you can hear the Lord and he would give you a next step too.
Yeah.
There are definitely body strategies, literally things that we can do with our bodies, like the deep breathing, which we talked about on a previous episode, which sounds cheesy, but is actually really scientifically robust for what it does in terms of connecting our brain and our body, specifically the emotionally charged part of our brain, the limbic system, with our body. That even simply, doing some physical exercise, things that you can do with your body. There are brain strategies in terms of thinking about your thinking. Like, what is driving this right now? Right. If we're at a place where we can do that, then we want to pull back the layers and think, okay, well, I'm feeling this way. What am I thinking right now? Yeah. And is it true? Is it helpful? Even if it's true, is it helpful? If it's not true, okay, well, and begin to do some of those brain strategies. And then I call them buddy strategies. So body, brain, buddy, but leaning into a relationship and literally just being with somebody else.
Yeah.
Because when we look at each other, there's something literally happening in our brains, right? With the mirror neurons.
Yes.
And when we go and have coffee, when we laugh together, when we share stories, that literally helps our well-being. So those are simple, but very everyday practical strategies.
Yeah.
What Denisha said, and then these body, brain, or buddy strategies.
So what you're saying, right? And just to recap, part of letting anxiety take over is not doing the things that are accessible, like stopping, slowing down, going outside, physical exercise. If it's, I'm not saying bench press 300, but maybe just going for a walk, right? Which may be out of your regular routine, but it's something you need to incorporate into your structure,
right?
Because it's good for you. Talking to another person. Think about that. One of the things that's really drive me crazy about, this younger generation that I've seen is this whole
You sound old when you say
I know. Well, I'm a dad, and so, but my youngest son, he's 8 years old, and what he likes to do, and I don't know where he got this from, but he just wanted to start watching YouTube of other kids playing video games, and they're talking while they're playing the video game, and they're talking as if they're talking to you, but they're not in the room. And I'm like, this is not real. Like, no. You need to go outside and go climb a tree or something. Turn this off. Go climb a tree, break something. Like, go outside and do something. Let's invite an actual person over.
Yes.
And you can
in
have
his
fun.
defense, when you watch the Sox, you're watching other people play a game and hear other people talk
True.
about
it. But
well,
I'm part of the experience because I'm physically there.
Yeah. Well, and you're exactly right. Actually, I just read about this in an article that came out last month. It's not so much, all these old people talking about social media isn't necessarily the problem. It's what it's replacing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pseudo community, is what I would say. This isn't real. You're not having a conversation with somebody or having a shared experience, which is meaningful, and helpful for you. And so the same thing, right? There are things we can do, but there comes a place where we try these things. I'll use physical therapy as an example, right? I got this pain in my arm, doc, like something's wrong. I don't have mobility to. I'm like, okay, well, why don't we try this? Go to physical therapy. They're going to teach you some exercises like breathing, like going outside, like doing these things that you can do at home. Try those and see if it works out. We're going to do that for 6 to 8 weeks, and then we're going to see if that works out. If it doesn't, then we may need to do some further testing, like an MRI. We need to get in there and see, oh, you got a torn, rotator cuff. Like, that's a problem. There comes a point where we're trying these things that we can do. I can make time to go outside. I can try to breathe, but if it doesn't stop this excessive worry, it's an indicator that something else has control of my fear. And that's probably when we need to invite, or take a deeper look, right, into, I would say, a different type of structured environment, right?
Yeah.
Of having a coach, a professional therapist, counselor, not just a friend, but somebody that went to school, right? Who's studied this.
Thank you, Eric.
To come alongside you, right?
Yes.
Going to the mechanic for my car that I can't fix.
Yeah.
Going to a therapist that can help me understand where I'm at and how to get to the next step.
Yes. Yeah, because we're trained on how to unpack that. And so having good friends is good, but it does not replace therapy.
Right.
And, having conversations with people and being vulnerable takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to even say, this is what I'm thinking about, or this is what's bothering me. It takes courage to do that, and so, and being vulnerable and sharing, like, I feel a little bit off. It takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And so having a space where someone is going to be there and not judge or look at you any kind of way, but just wanting to help, as therapists, we want to help see you get to a place where you feel better. And so whatever that looks like, and that's why I said therapy is for everybody. You may be doing okay in your life, but you feel off and you want to process or talk about a few things. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And I think that's also why we're bringing these things up, is because life can be great. You could be making great money, have a great family, live in a beautiful home, right? You have all these things, but yet something's off. You are excessively worrying about the bottom line. And if the bottom line isn't, like you said, this awe and fear of God, which is so much better,
right,
but it's misplaced and put on this other thing, that's moving the rails so that the train can't go in the right direction. Right. And that's what it is. It could be as easy as something like that, but sometimes it's not as easy to reverse that. And we need help. We need a friend. We need a coach, right? We need a professional trained therapist, counselor. So I think it's really good. I think about the person watching this, and maybe, you're, this is helping you to be kind of self-aware of where you're at, or maybe there's somebody that pops into your mind. It's a spouse, a child, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker. I think our hope and our goal is to really that, to help you take the next step towards wellness.
Yeah.
Right. Listen to this podcast isn't going to do it. It's not a light switch, right? Some of this stuff didn't happen overnight. It ain't going to get fixed overnight. But one step in the right direction begins the process. And I think about this kind of Christian word we use, like sanctification. It's a long process, right? And it's a work of God that he's doing. And ultimately, and this goes back to an earlier podcast where we talked about the reparenting, right? God is reparenting us, helping us to think differently, literally, as we come to know Jesus. So all of this is working together, but if you're taking that next step, we're happy to help. We're glad that you're listening to this. Maybe you need to share this with somebody. It would mean the world to us if you would, if you'd subscribe to this podcast and share it with somebody. And we'll talk to you in the next episode.